Welcome to a new episode of Manage to Retain, where I talk about issues around business for employees, your customers, recruiting, retention, productivity, and profitability. And I do it with my friends, Sherri and Lou. Listen in, you might get a few tips here on how to do leadership better in your business. Hi, everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of Manage to Retain. This is a series that we do weekly to look into how you run an organization effectively as a leader. And gosh, there are so many dimensions. I will tell you from a first point of view, I thought I understood leadership when I was an employee, and then I got into leadership. And it is so much more about personality and being a human than it is about technical capability. You need to understand some of that as well. So in this episode, we're going to talk about perceptions employees have of their managers. And if you can diagnostically see what that looks like, visually see that, how you can take actionable insight or take action from the insights that you see from an image. But I want to do something real quick. I want to tell you who I am. My name is Vinay Raman. I'm the CEO of Carmo. And we take data from companies, and within 30 days, we'll help you improve your recruiting, your retention, your productivity, and your profitability using our proven process. So we take data and help you make hay out of that data. But there's an important part that is missing there, and that is creating the culture and the leadership who can drive that intentional culture. And that's why I have my friends, Sherri and Lou. Sherri and Lou, how are you all doing today?
Doing excellent, Vinay. Nice to see you
again. Good to see you. Do you mind telling people a little bit about who you all are and what you do so they understand where you come from and why you're here?
Yeah, sure. Well, if you ask my father, he'd say I was from the moon, but we won't go there, right? Now, Sherri and I, we own a company called the Lou Everett Group. We've got a team of amazing individuals that have all together probably have now close to, we've got about 5 decades now altogether, probably close to 100 years of experience combined, where we do is we provide, based on our principles and our proven principles, a way to up level and upskill not just your employees, but you as a leader, so that you can drive results based upon performance and finding out where the tweaks and adjustments need to be without truly impacting the bottom line.
So, gosh, part of the most difficult thing for me in being a leader is it seems so squishy. It seems so abstract. It seems so, there's so many things happening at once. How do I separate it into pieces where I can figure out where I need to focus some time and attention? Because I suspect that most leaders, if they're anything like me, we're go-getters, we're doers. That's why we got to that leadership position. But if I don't know what I've got to tackle, I don't know how to go forward.
Right.
So, Louis, you had talked once before about this idea of diagnosing an HVAC system or a heating and air conditioning system, and you talked about the voltmeter, right? Gosh, if I could only have a voltmeter for some dimension of my leadership, I could tell I know what to do, right? The voltage is too low. The voltage is too high. I know what to do next.
Yeah.
So what I'd like to do here is share with everyone a tool that the three of us has created together. It's an employee to manager assessment. Let's call this a voltmeter for employee perceptions of the managers. Let me share my screen and let's walk through that. So for anybody who's listening in for the first time, thank you for joining us. For those who have joined us before, I appreciate you joining in again. The first thing I'd like to hear from you, just before I go through this, is what brought you here today? What is the part of the Manage to Retain episode or series, or what is the topic that is really interesting? Is it culture? Is it people? Is it profitability, productivity that is bringing you to the table? And you can enter that into the comments. All right, let me go ahead and talk to you about our employee voltmeter. That's what I named it.
Yeah.
So we've got this company. We named them Fictional Pest. We renamed the people. But of all the people in Fictional Pest, and you'll see there's a long list of people here, a fair list of people here. The average person on a scale of 0 to 100 ranks as a 53 in terms of this assessment tool, how it shows that they're doing, right about in the middle there. This particular employee, their initials are OP, has got a score of a 43 compared to the average, which is a 53. Well, that, as a leader, causes me a little bit of, wonder what's going on here. I get a little curious as to what it is. And I see that there are
a series of scores here that could be either green, yellow, and or red. You can also see this visually where you look at this graph, the outside edges are 100%, as in highly effective. You want lots and lots of blue because the blue is OP in this case.
Right.
And the darker gray here, that's your average employee. I've done a lot of talking there, Sherri and Lou. What do you see when you're looking at this graph? What comes to mind as leadership experts?
Well, we've been privy a little bit to some of the other results, so we're able to understand that as this particular employee is kind of an outlier from some of these others, although it's not really too far from the average, which is, if the average was a 73, the 143 wouldn't be a super, it'd be like, okay, we just got to talk to this employee, which we still need to. We want to find out kind of what that perception is. They're mad about something. That's pure. There's something that's not going right here because they're still an outlier. But there's just a 10% differential. It's not a super different. So
they're disengaged, right?
Yeah, there's definitely a disengagement happening here. Did you want to capitalize on that a little bit?
No, I think this is really, especially with the trend right now, which has been named a million different ways, but quiet quitting is a trend at the moment. At least the name is. But if you think back of different generations, we called it, what we used to call it? We used to call it checking out as one, where they're just kind of sitting back and going, you know what, forget it.
Yeah.
I'm just going to do the
Purposeful
bare
checkout.
Yeah, I'm just going to do the bare minimum and then, collect a paycheck. So here is a diagnostic that it's like, you know what, all we need to do is just turn that dial a little bit. And again, to have a conversation, but now we actually have the data to prove it, and then it opens up the conversation that we could try, at least attempt to talk to the person that may be checking out and could make that distinction of like, okay, can we make this better? Or maybe it's better off that we should cut that person loose.
I will tell you one thing, that this employee does not look highly upon their supervisor.
Yeah, that's right.
At all. So there's certainly some challenges here in relationship that would need to be looked at.
So a question for anybody who's listening in. I'd love to hear your thoughts here, right? You can see that this is how the average employee looks. You can see that this is the perception of an employee, if this whole thing were completely blue, that they have a very, very high perception and opinion of their boss. But this is how they see their boss right now, this small little blue area in the middle here. And specifically, my manager slash supervisor is highly effective, right? An effective leader. They see that is not very much the truth. My manager is more rational than emotional. They don't see that as very much the truth. You can start to see here the story that is starting to evolve. Gosh, if you want to figure out when and why quiet quitting is occurring in your organization, here's a graph that shows you an example of what it looks like.
There you go. There you go. And it's interesting because the last few that we've looked at have the same red.
Yeah.
Selected. So interesting look here.
So I'm kind of curious for anybody who's in the audience. Do you see how by just looking at a graph here in just almost in an instant, you can kind of see that quiet quitting or this person having half a foot out the door could very likely be a possibility? And is in your mind now, do you see how you can take an action or how you can focus your attention to potentially turn that tide? That's a question I'd love to hear from you and answer. I'm just looking for a yes or no. Sherri and Lou, as leadership experts, looking at this, we see that this person just doesn't feel like their manager is very effective. What do you think is happening here? Is it an employee problem? Is it a supervisor problem? What's going on in your mind?
Well, and it's always going to be a combination of both. Because it always starts with the leader, so it's always going to be a leadership problem. I want to get that out there. That no matter if you are a leader, if you are a manager, a supervisor, leader, whatever you want to call it, and you with position, you have people that you lead, and you ever approach something like this and said, "Oh, it's got to be them." Right off the bat, you've already put yourself aside, because as a leader, we need to fully take responsibility, regardless of where the root is originally. Because why didn't we see this sooner?
Yeah.
Right? Who's going to answer that? right? And so when it comes down to it, who is at fault? It's the leader. It's always going to be the leader's responsibility to identify where the solution is, and that's where this comes in. It's better we do this now, right? Just like a withering plant. The plant begins to wither, but it's a little time for us to water it, feed it before it fully dies. So we have some time maybe, but we've got to act now. And the only way we can act now and kind of stop the bleeding, if you will, we use that phrase a lot, is to use this type of tool to identify where those gaps are and reconnect and realign where we need to be realigned.
So what I'd love to hear from anybody listening in is, do you see where Lou is going with that? The idea that if you just give a little bit more water to this plant, you can bring it back alive as opposed to it withering out and dying. I'd love to hear your answer. Yes or no is kind of what I'm looking for. But Sherri and Lou, I want to transition because this is someone who I think might be in recoverable state, right? What if we look at someone who might be a little further down the road in this trend? I want to look at this employee, right? We look at this. My manager creates clear goals for our group. It's an 80. It's actually not too bad. I mean, the average is a 63. They answered 80. My manager is highly effective. They answered an 80. But my supervisor is more rational than emotional.
Yeah.
My manager supervisor models how to work effectively with others, provides me opportunities to develop and grow, cares about me as an individual. This person, I think, is starting to hold a little bit of a grudge at this point. Is that what you all see as well?
There's absolutely a relationship problem, right? Like we had mentioned before in another one, it's always about relationships. It's always about connecting. When it comes down to it, that's really what it is. I mean, we could give a whole bunch of scenarios as to what's happening here. Because the grudge, that's a good word for it. Here's an example. This person applied, interviewed for a manager supervisor role that their current manager got and they didn't.
Yeah.
There's an example. Now I'm just building a scenario on where results like this might be seen.
Yeah.
Because if we've kept an employee around and then this person is not a performance driven person. If they're going to rate, now mind you, we could certainly take and compare their performance based upon their management perspective. But generally speaking, if they have the view of their manager like this, it's more or less because of there's a very specific reason why this perspective, and they're the outlier here.
Yeah.
While this manager, the supervisor may not have gotten the best scores overall, but this is the only one that scored as low as they did.
So the question I would like to ask people listening in here, can you see that now visually you might find that person who might be starting to become a cancer in your company, right? Mm-hmm. And now there's two options that you have, right? You can start to treat it and remedy it. And there's a path back from even actual medical cancer. There's a long path back from that recovery. Mm-hmm. But now you are able to see it and actually do something about it using a diagnostic tool like this.
Yeah.
Or you can start to say, all right, well, how much more do I want to let this cancer to metastasize throughout the course of the body that is the company, right? And now you can take some action on it. Can you see that in this graph and how in just a moment you can do that? I'd love to hear that in the comments. But I'd like to stop sharing screens because we've done that for a little while here. And I'd like to bring it back to Sherri and Lou for a little bit. Specifically, Sherri and Lou, we looked at two different people. One person who's kind of in the wilting plant, I'll call it, right? And we looked at this plant that's about on its last legs, right? In two different stages. And we were able to very quickly assess that just by looking at those images and looking at the information. Yeah. I mean, this whole idea of quiet quitting, that's the wilting plant. The right. person who is now trying to actively might even be slightly disgruntled because they've been passed over a couple of times, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe even by people who are junior to them who have been now passed over them, right? Yeah. They're a little ticked off. Now, there's an opportunity to heal that, but you have to be able to see it.
That's right.
Give me some ideas as to how a leader could use some of this information. And I'd like you to incorporate some of those 10 principles that you all use and explain what those principles are as well. I gave you a lot there.
No, that's good. No, thank you for that. Very, very, very good. Yeah, we have 10 principles that we believe that every leader must follow to really lead with influence, to do it effectively. And one of those 10 principles that fit really well into here, and that really fits well into everything that we do as a leader, because it's so easy for us to get defensive. And we've got to eliminate that defensiveness by putting our ego aside. So there's our ego principle that's super important, right? We all have an ego, and it plays a part in everything we do, and it's necessary, but we've got to balance that out. But even more so, our reflect principle is super important here, because what we reflect on breathes on what we're intentional about. If we reflect upon what we can do as leaders in the situations we've accompanied today, what can I do as a leader to help rectify this? What can I do as a leader, or what did I do to make this happen? What did I do to make this impression happen? So those are the types of things we need to do to reflect on as a leader, because not only do we positively impact ourselves by doing that and change, we impact and transform those that we lead.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. I appreciate you all walking through that and sharing some of your experiences in leading highly effective leaders and teams. If you've been liking what you're seeing so far, I'll tell you, this is an assessment that will drop into the comments, and you can use this for your own team to find out what is actually happening in your team and get these same little insights. So feel free to look at the comments there and take that assessment for yourself. It's completely free. But the last thing I want to ask you, for anybody who listened in, is I love to hear if you found this an effective use of time. On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being highly effective, 1 being not so effective. Give me a sense of how this podcast or this conversation was. Did you find it effective or not? Just give me a score of 1 to 10. So thank you so much for listening in and sharing some of your time with us. But finally, Sherri and Lou, thanks as always for sharing your time with me.
Of course, Vinay, always a pleasure. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.